What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So some of the big things people are discussing around the Switch 2 leading into that April 2nd big reveal is the price, and then of course the release date. And now, based on some recent shipping logs, it appears maybe the Switch 2 is closer than we thought. We'll go over that though here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Microsoft and AI in gaming, which as we've seen already is a pretty big push by them. And now a new feature they're tying into it actually makes sense and could be quite useful for the player. We'll look at that. And then also Silent Hill F. We had a big reveal for it with a new trailer yesterday, and this one seems to have the core Silent Hill fans kind of torn right now, but we'll go over all of that and more today. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or the link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with Square Enix and Final Fantasy 16, as of course there have been people curious about maybe how the title's been selling since that initial 3 million or so were announced after like the first week of the game being out, because we haven't heard much else from Square. All they've told us is it came in below expectations for the most part, which that seems to be a common thing for Square Enix, but we may have a more tangible number here, although there are a lot of questions still raised from this. Now, this is from a securities analyst out of Tokyo. They put out an entire report around different companies out of Japan for gaming and what some of their future prospects look like, the strength of the company, a lot of stuff for investors mostly. But there was this paragraph here that caught a lot of headlines. And we can see it says, incidentally, Final Fantasy 16, released in June 2011. It's, okay, technically 2023, but maybe typo or something maybe, is said to have already sold over 3.5 million copies. They say that's according to Square Enix HD President Takashi Kiro at the financial results briefing. Now we have to assume that that was a recent briefing, I guess, that they attended or had information from. 3.5 million copies, though, is kind of alarming for this game if that's where it is right now, because it sold or shipped, we'll say, 3 million copies, of course, in that first week or so. And then that means after another year and a half or more, they sold 500,000 copies. That would be a very poor velocity for the game. A short tail in general. That would have been completely gone after just a few months, and then maybe the PC version spiked sales again, and then it's kind of plateaued at this point. So it's not a great look there, but I will say that the 2011 thing threw me off as well, because if you're questioning that, you're like, okay, what about maybe the amount of copies sold? We need more information from Square, but right now, if it is 3.5 million, not looking great for Final Fantasy 16. Also, we have good news for Space Marine 2 fans, because looks like you're getting a sequel to that one. This we can see posted up. This was an official release over on Focus Entertainment's website, saying Focus Entertainment Publishing announces the development of Warhammer 40k Space Marine 3. Now, I have to assume this is way off in the future. Well, I should say way off years, right? Sure, like 4 or 5 years, something like that. Although I guess the gap between Space Marine 1 and Space Marine 2 is quite a while, so 4 or 5 years wouldn't feel that long necessarily, but it's hard to argue the success of Space Marine 2. It crossed 5 million copies sold, and we heard about that, a couple of months ago, so it's probably even more than that at this point. But it makes sense that they would continue on with that franchise just from the popularity. And the game itself was very fun, and it felt like a callback to some of the older third-person action-style games, kind of that Gears of War style, sure, but like the Gears of War from the Xbox 360 days, really. But good to see this continuing on, especially again after that long gap between 1 and 2. They probably wanted to get out there quickly and be like, no, there will be a 3, and you shouldn't have to wait as long, technically. Like I said, maybe give them 4 years and we'll see where we are then. Oh, and we did get the grand opening date for Nintendo in San Francisco, which we can see this on their official account. They say Nintendo will open the doors to Nintendo San Francisco on May 15th. It's the second official store in the United States. Details on reservation requirements and an early look at exclusive products will be shared as we approach the grand opening. Remember that date, by the way, May 15th. We're going to come back to that here in a little bit, but yeah, there you go. I mean, they of course wanted to have seemingly a store on the West Coast and the East Coast, and they're opening in San Francisco. So I guess if you're local to San Francisco, you can put it on your calendar. May 15th, they're going to be doing reservations, the whole thing. So you're going to keep an eye on that one. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo Switch 2 and the potential that we could actually be closer to release than we think right now. I will say there are predictions flying currently that if it's going to make it out before summertime, you assume June would be the latest. And I mean, that would make sense. I still think there's potential for it to come in maybe right at the end of May, but sure, we could say first half of June. But it could even be sooner than that. And while we do have the big event happening April 2nd, I mean, if you go 30 days after that, right at the beginning of May, and then give it another month, okay, there we go. We're right at the end of May, technically. But we're starting to hear about maybe some shipping details already for the Switch 2. And this gets kind of interesting because maybe Nintendo doesn't want to wait that long after April 2nd. We can see this posted up. This is from Go Nintendo. Says this info comes courtesy of user LIC over on the Famiboards forums. According to their research, a Vietnamese manufacturer called HVBG was contracted by Nintendo and has already produced shipped over 383,000 units of the Switch 2. More specifically, those units were shipped to North America in January and are intended for distribution throughout the United States and Canada, in addition to the consoles themselves. LIC reports that HVBG has shipped 41,598 charging grip units as well. It's important to note that over on Fanboards, LIC and others have been tracking a lot of shipment information and different things so that they can keep track of where parts are. And I mean, really, they've been following the manufacturing process for quite a while, since like last year. And that's how we found out about like the chip that was in the Switch 2 from NVIDIA, and then all the other parts going into it, down to the batteries and different things that are coming together, of course, to then create the unit and then ship out as we are seeing here. Now, the other part about this is a lot of it tends to be kind of delayed data. So they're pointing to January as a lot of the stuff being shipped out. And that it's interesting to consider that right now, yes, there may be Switch 2 systems that are in transit in warehouses in North America. I mean, if this was in January, we're now in March, weeks out from this big event. How far off would the Switch 2 be really? And that is where it gets kind of interesting. So while you look at April 2nd, you're like, okay, they're probably not going to launch it in a month. Like, they'll give at least a month for retailers, you assume, to get things set up and ready to go from like the storefront perspective with shelves and creating a whole new section, really, getting that all set up. So what if it's like a month and a half? Would they go 2 months? That really is, I think, the kind of the time period from them making the announcement to it coming out. If you look at the Switch, the current one, when they made that announcement in January, I mean, they were, 2 months out from the Switch's release? You could see a similar timetable, even shorter this time, because we don't really need the concept or anything explained to us. We already know what we're kind of going to get out of the Switch 2, other than the games, which they'll tell us about on April 2nd. That's the part that's kind of tripping me up a little bit, that one, the software. Because if you're going to have some big games to release, third-party wise and first-party, you feel like that would be the thing you'd want a bit more of a run-up for outside of the hardware. So May 15th has actually come up quite a bit online. Could it happen May 15th? I mean, yeah, to me, nothing's off the table right now. I'm still right at the end of May, so I think we'll get almost 2 months from them making the announcement April 2nd to it coming out, and that's kind of where I'm right now. I don't think it's going to be in June. I think that second half of May makes the most sense for them. Release it, get it out ahead of the summer, of course, and then roll all the way into the holiday with fresh supply, ready to sell out, I'm sure, all over again, and have resellers, scalpers take advantage of the big holiday push. But that's kind of where we are currently with Switch 2's. Yes, already in transit, it appears. And the other thing about that, when you think about how there have been system leaks and games leaking out, a lot of times they seem to walk out the back door of some of these warehouses. So that would be an interesting situation if 2 weeks before the Switch 2 came out, it turns out somebody already got one and started posting stuff online, and Nintendo would probably swoop it. It'd be a whole thing, I'm sure. But for now, we'll see what they have April 2nd. But don't be surprised if they show it there and then they're like, oh yeah, it's coming out in 6 or 7 weeks. Get ready. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft and AI, which is a big thing for them right now at a company level. And it appears they are working to integrate it in heavily when it comes to gaming, whether it's for development, as we've seen from Phil Spencer, and even to maybe assistance for helping you out in different games or finding titles you might like to play based on your preferences. Well, we can see this is posted up. This is over on Xbox's main news website. And they say, this is introduced on the podcast, which was Copilot for Gaming. Xbox insiders can get an early preview of it on mobile soon. This AI-driven sidekick is designed to be your personalized gaming companion, helping you get to your favorite games faster, coaching you to improve your skills, and connecting you better with your friends and communities. Copilot for Gaming will be there when you need it, but out of the way if you don't. They say, quote, "Gaming is the only form of entertainment where you can get stuck," said Carter, that was on the podcast. So that's where you want something to show up to say, let's help you get past that. That is a good point though, because if you're someone who just hangs out and watches movies or TV shows on Netflix, I mean, it's a pretty passive experience in that you don't have to interact much at all outside of pressing play or pause when you have to get up and go get a drink or something like that. In this case though, with gaming, you're directly interacting and controlling sort of the path forward for that title, which, yes, can lead you into just brick walls at times where you're not really sure what to do. So I will say the idea of an AI assistant that is able to understand natural language spoken to it and then come up with a natural response that is genuinely helpful is not a bad thing for mainstream. That to me is a good use of AI if it can, say, get you past a sticking point in like a big adventure game. And you're like, I don't know where to go right now. And then maybe the overlaid AI, the assistant, can come out and be like, oh, look, I'll highlight these areas for you on your map, and that's where you want to go. All right, if you need any more help, let me know. I don't want to spoil it for you. Like then you go, okay, they're just kind of nudging you in that direction. The other thing they mentioned that I think makes a lot of sense is if you've been away from a game for a long time. Tell me if you've experienced this before, but you're away from a game for a year and you're like, I'm gonna go pick that game up. Maybe a new DLC came out. Maybe you just dropped it and you're like, I want to give it another shot. You go back and, oh yeah, I was 10 hours into this game. What was I doing? Some games have already realized that, and they give you like a little sequence of flashbacks or just quick summaries and stuff that you can go through, but not every game. So I will say, if this assistant can come out and be like, okay, here's what the basic controls are, and this is kind of where the story left you off and what you were doing a year ago, that would actually be pretty impressive and very useful, even if you're a veteran player or somebody who's been playing games for a while, doesn't need help about where to go. It's like, what was I doing? That actually makes a lot of sense. And of course, recommending titles to you based on games that maybe you've spent a ton of time in, and then avoiding games that you keep dropping after like an hour or two. So that's actually very useful, and I think a very good idea for AI to help out in gaming. Now, it appears this is something Xbox insiders can try out for mobile, so I'm not sure when this is going to come to Xbox, the console, or maybe this is a next generation thing that they'll be working out and testing here on mobile specifically, and maybe it also makes its way to PC with that big launch we assume of a unified OS, along with an assistant that can follow you between platforms. See, that's what I mean. This is the kind of thing that Microsoft excels at, and I would expect for them to really take advantage of going into next generation. So we'll see how their AI assistant continues to evolve and when they're ready to launch it, how it actually performs. Next up, let's talk about Silent Hill F, which was announced by like a couple of years ago or so. And since then, it's been very quiet until yesterday when we had that Silent Hill transmission and they released a new trailer, which I think actually looks really good, but it does bring up a lot of questions around Silent Hill in general and the direction of now the franchise. But we can see some of the trailer here. We also have a bit of a description here, just getting into a few more details for us. I will say up front, we didn't get any release date, so I'm not really sure when this thing is coming out. I'd like to think it'll make it out this year, but this could end up being a 2026 thing. They say when Shimizu Hanako's secluded town of Ibisogoka is consumed by a sudden fog, her once familiar home becomes a haunting nightmare. They have a catchphrase here: find the beauty and terror in this new Japanese psychological horror. And I will say they did that quite a bit in the trailer. They had like flowers blooming and stuff, and then all of a sudden it turned into like all kinds of scenes out of a psychological horror movie and stuff, and a lot of body horror stuff. It was very, very shocking and contrasting at times based on what they were showing. They say, as the town falls silent and the fog thickens, Hanako must navigate the twisted paths of Ibisogoka, solving complex puzzles and confronting grotesque monsters to survive. That part does sound like Silent Hill. They're going to say that this is imagined by renowned author Ryukishi 07. People are very excited when it comes to some of the writing and stuff here around it. which is cool. My thing is though that's so interesting about this. One, this is the first time they've taken the franchise to Japan, of course. The other thing is it's technically not in the town of Silent Hill, so people are like, okay, why? How does this Silent Hill exactly? Couldn't this just be any other original horror game then? I mean, that's the other part. They have the fog coming in, which is like iconic for Silent Hill, of course, and that's the other part is, will they be able to tie it all together, and maybe Silent Hill can kind of branch out and go to different locations and have different characters, and that's kind of what it feels like Konami is doing right now, is trying to build this franchise up and build it out. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But I will say this, I like the idea of it leaning heavily into some of the psychological horror, and as you go through that trailer, you definitely see it the entire way, all the way up to the end when they have kind of like a shocking end scene that cuts out, and I like what I'm seeing here. I do. It's Silent Hill 2 still had like the psychological horror stuff, but they were somewhat limited, we'll say, with the PS2, and the remake kind of had to play off of that. Well done remake. But this one, kind of an original take, new original story, different characters. They could do some really cool stuff here, and I like the theme where they have like again the flowers, and then contrasting in some of the beauty and horror and terror. I'm interested. I am. So it still don't have a release date on it. Seems like something that I'd like to see this year, but again, 2026 maybe. Xbox Series, PlayStation 5, and PC. So here's hoping we get more information at some point this year, and hopefully that ends up being a release date. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the PlayStation Portal for a moment, because Sony has been doing something kind of odd with this device. They've been doing these very quiet updates, which I know they're doing the cloud streaming as a beta right now, but you feel like they'd want to really put out there that you can actually do a lot with the Portal currently without a PlayStation 5, like, at all. In fact, we can see this posted up. This is over on True Trophies. It says, after the recent PlayStation Portal PlayStation Plus Premium streaming update for March 2025, handheld owners can now find almost every PS1 and PSP game available in the Classics catalog listed in the cloud streaming beta library. And I might end up doing a video on this, just kind of going over what's on the PlayStation Portal, because it's actually quite substantial. There's a lot there, and it's all streaming through the cloud. And yes, you have some of the classic stuff really finding its way into this service at this point, and there are many of them that are just like turn-based RPGs, for example, where the cloud streaming stuff really doesn't have as much of an effect on the gameplay as if it's a fighting game or a first-person shooter, even a driving game. But when you go down the list of titles now, it's more than 250 different games you can pick from, and it just streams immediately. And I've seen the PlayStation Portal on sale somewhat recently for under $150. It does make you look at that and go, huh, okay, well, if I have a PlayStation Plus Premium account, I can just stream all these games. I guess that is the one big hang up though, is you kind of need that PlayStation Plus Premium to be able to stream a lot of this stuff. But if maybe you're on the go a lot and you're traveling and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to have access to my PS5 through the spotty connection, or your PS5 just shut down completely and like from an update, it's not going to reconnect now. Well, okay, there you go. I guess I'll just stream from the cloud when I'm able to. That's the kind of stuff that you do look at the Portal a little differently. So maybe we'll check that out a bit more in depth in a video where we go through and take a look at the library. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion? 53% say no, 47% say yes. Some were surprised in the comments, but I have to remind many of you, let's say you're in like your mid 30s or something, you're like, oh, Oblivion, everyone should have played that game. But then you stop and think and go, wow, that game came out 19 years ago. Like, I think back to when that title released. It was on the 2006 Xbox 360. I remember playing it there. My friends had it. And like just that initial illumination spell that you get to light up a cave was mind-blowing, because we're coming off of the original Xbox, the PS2, and the GameCube. Just that effect that looks super primitive and janky now was incredible. It's like, it's never getting any better than this. And now you look at it and go, wow, that game needs some help. So the remake will be really cool to see, and it feels like we're not that far off, and it could even get Shadow Drop next month. Awesome. But we can even make people feel a little older than that even with the comment of the day. Let's take a look at here. This we can see is from Andy. Says, a while back, I mentioned to a 20-year-old gamer coworker of mine, I was playing a lot of Sea of Stars. He said he had never heard of it, so I told him it's an RPG similar to Chrono Trigger. When he then told me he never heard of Chrono Trigger either, I died a little inside. And, well, look, if they're 20 years old, right? A coworker. Think about that. Chrono Trigger came out 30 years ago now. All right. That's a long time ago. That was before many people now in the workforce are coming out of college or have been in the workforce for years now. It was before they were born. And then you also look at that style. It's not necessarily something that clicks with the current audience, the newer gamers that are coming in, because all they've ever known are like the 3D graphics and stuff. Not they can't appreciate the older ones, but it's different. I feel like when you come up with 8-bit, 16-bit graphics, and that's it. That's the best that we have at that time. It's still something you look back on and remember it incredibly fondly. Whereas newer gamers are like, what is going on? What is this? What are we doing here? Where's the ray tracing? So, okay, maybe not, but like, you know what I'm saying there. So something with that's interesting about Chrono Trigger is it's 30 years old. So you might go, oh, I remember playing that game when I was 10, and then you go, wow, that was 25 years ago. Better yet, that was a quarter of a century ago. Hopefully that make you feel too old. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to see the GameCube load up a copy of Windows. I actually did that last weekend. I'll leave that in a card right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.